You guys may remember an apple butter video. It did really well, but that's not the point. It was super easy. It's in the slow cooker. There really wasn't a lot of work. So recently I did an event and I created a pumpkin apple butter. Slightly different, a few different flavor profiles, nothing majorly different, but it definitely has pumpkin, or actually, newsflash, it has squash in it, guys. And I'm gonna tell you why. A lot of times when we buy canned pumpkin, you see the big words, pumpkin on the can, you get all excited. Guess what it usually is? Yeah, it's usually squash. So I am using my favorite squash, which is a kabocha or a kabocha. I use it because it has a slight drier consistency and texture than the butternut. It's not quite, it has the same flavor profile, just as sweet, but just not as much water in it. So I just really like to use it. So if you can find that one, use that one. Otherwise, any type of winter squash that's yellow and sweet. So I have that all cut up, ready to go. I have most of my apples ready. The reason you mix the two is you could totally probably do a pumpkin butter on its own. The texture and consistency I think is just better when you have some of the apple. Also, the apple definitely lends that sweet, kind of tart flavor that I think you just kind of need in a fruit butter like this. So as you're noticing, and as you may have noticed before, I am not peeling the apples. That's because when we're done, we're gonna blend it all together and it's gonna cook long enough that the skins of the apples, they really just blend up really easily. But don't think for a second you can do that with the squash. You can't. No, that will not blend near as easily. It would still stay gritty, grainy, not be near as good or delicious to use. So I peeled the squash. It's not necessarily always fun, but you need to. So I've cored the apples, left the peel on. Now we're just gonna start loading them up into the slow cooker. This is kind of a fun just way. One, I am someone living on a farm, living with a lot of times a good either apple harvest. Almost every year is a good squash harvest. I mean, if you grow squash, you guys, it will be your friend forever. It's just a fun way to use it up. This is also a great thing to use for gifts or with the holidays coming up to have on your table, because apple or apple pumpkin butter is delicious on biscuits or on homemade bread or anything like that. So don't feel like there's not ways to use it, because there is overnight oats. That's good. So to that, we're gonna add some sugar. You of course need some sugar. I'm using brown because again, it adds more of those caramely notes. It also, I just think it's good with the brown sugar. So I'm adding that right in there. Now we have the spices. They're slightly different than a regular apple butter. Of course there's gonna be cinnamon, because that's just, please, like, it's still fall and you need that. But I'm also adding ground ginger. It's wonderful because it's reminiscent of like a pumpkin pie. So you get some of those notes in there and it kind of balances out like the heaviness that can come from cooking it a long time. And then a little bit of allspice, which again, I think allspice and apples can go really well together. It can be strong, so don't overuse it. We're just doing a little bit. And then I do always feel like it needs some nutmeg. So I'm always gonna put a couple quick grates of the nutmeg in there, especially with the pumpkin. I mean, that's what's really reminiscent of the pumpkin pie too, is a little bit of nutmeg. Of course, some salt. I'm just gonna add a little bit of salt. I think it just balances everything out. I think it's needed. And then some lemon juice. Again, I just like a little bit of that acidic flavor in there. It wakes everything up. You can just juice it right on top. Put the other half in there too. And instantly, that's all you're gonna do. So apple butter, as you know, it cooks for a long time. You know, back in the day, they used to do it, and I'm sure on the farm here they did it this way too. They would cook it outside in big vats and just cook it and cook it and cook it. So to make that quicker, you could do it on the stove, but then you have to babysit it. Or you could do it in a slow cooker. That's why I love to do the slow cooker, because it just kind of does the work for you. I put it on high, I let it go overnight, I really let it cook. In the morning I check it, it usually needs even more time. We're talking 10 hours, it could take more. Just because apples, depending on what season they were picked or when they were ready, or how firm of apple or crisp of apple they were, they could take longer to cook down. So when everything is extremely soft and you've cooked off some of that extra liquid, sometimes even remove the lid for like the last hour, then it's ready to blend and it thickens and becomes delicious in just this rich butter-like spread. So I'm gonna stir together. Spices, delicious, love it, smells like fall. Put the lid on. I'm gonna let it cook overnight. I'm gonna go to bed and I'm just gonna wake up to an amazing house smell. I love that. It's just an added, but it's like potpourri. This has sat overnight. That's what makes this so simple. So in the last 4 hours, I took the lid off and I have it still on high. I put it back to high and I'm just letting that cook down a little bit more for that some of that residual, just extra liquid. And as you can see, it has just a beautiful consistency. There's liquid, which you want because then as we blend it, it will work into it. So as a final step, just kind of add a little bit of je ne sais quoi, should we say? I'm gonna add just a little bit of maple flavoring. Not a lot, it can overpower. I just like to add a little bit, stir that in. I just think there's something about it with the pumpkin, of course the apple too, but it adds just like that extra fall tone, especially as we get closer to Thanksgiving. I think that's really fun because guys, think of this on your Thanksgiving table. Yeah, I know, you just became more thankful, right? I get it. As you remember, this has pumpkin apple butter. Now, generally you would think, okay, let's go buy sugar pie pumpkins. You can totally do that, that's fine. I don't necessarily always like these. I think they can be inconsistent. Sometimes they're kind of stringy, sometimes they don't have the best texture or the best flavor. You know what I always love? Squash. Whether it's butternut, my favorite is kabocha. I just think the texture, the consistency is always spot on. It's a little bit drier, always sweet, delicious, and comes out almost creamy. Love them. And honestly, when you buy canned pumpkin, they're usually some type of squash because it's better to bake with often. So don't knock it, it's good. So all we have to do now at this point, we stirred in our maple, you could do vanilla too. I'm just gonna blend it. And a high-powered blender does make a difference. As you remember, we left those apple peels on, which they would break down in a normal blender too, but this is just going to ensure that they are so easy to break down. I'm probably gonna do this in 2 batches. Anytime there's anything hot, you don't wanna blend too much of it because that heat creates steam as it's blending, and then that steam wants to escape. So I'll grab my dish rag actually too, and then what I'm gonna do is leave that vent hole on top of that blender open. We're gonna put that on, and we're just gonna set this over the top so that steam can still escape and not blow up, because that happens. So about 30 seconds to a minute, and then check it. You can always do more. And as you can see, still hot. That's why you wanna let that steam escape as it's going. Look at that gorgeous consistency. This is what you want, that texture, where look how thick it is, how lush it is, creamy almost. That's perfect. I'm gonna grab a spoon just so I can taste it. I love that texture that you get, and it's usually so consistent with what this becomes, and I like, oh. So it's very reminiscent of apple butter. I see you get a slight more creaminess with that squash or pumpkin added in there. The flavor profile, just slightly different. You have hints of that ginger. But honestly, over time as it cooks, it becomes very similar, but just as delicious. So all you need to do at this point is decant it or put it into jars. And you can use, I'm gonna use some Weck jars here. If you wanna seal it, you can put it into a water bath, have prepared sterilized jars that are hot. This is hot, put them into a water bath for about 10 minutes and you should be good. Adjust for altitude. I often just like to freeze it. So I'll put it in little jars and then I'll just pop it in my freezer. It freezes absolutely perfectly. Tastes just like fresh when you pull it out. Use it on bread. Use it on biscuits, on overnight oats. Use it in anything. Like put it even with some coffee cake when you're having it. This one too, I like apple butter with pork. This is good with pork too. You're gonna find ways to use this. Think of a layer in the middle of a coffee cake. That excites me. I might do that. This is exactly what you want. It's perfect for fall. It's even better for Thanksgiving. I hope you share this around. I hope you look at the recipe, check the website, wiseguide.com for all these recipes. And do you know what helps me? When you guys share these videos, tag people in the comments. That really helps me because it helps share them around and I love to see so many people using them. Keep using them, keep making them. It's a good community here we're building. And I'm gonna keep trying this and putting it into jars and not eating it all.